What's up, guys? It's John at National Sports Entertainment, and I wanted to go into tonight's schedule. We didn't have a big schedule, but we did good. Like I said, I always post how we did in our Discord, and I always go over it in the playlist anyway. And just for those who don't know, I always put it in the notes, so it's always in our notes, and then that goes right into my Discord. That way, everybody can always trace every single pick. Now, we had a good night tonight. We went 5-2. We missed the Nebraska over by a few points, which is all right. As I've gone over multiple times, it's 3-leg losses are inevitable. We haven't had one in a bit. But as long as you win 7 sequences, that's 7 units. A 3-leg loss is a 7-unit loss. Now, I say 8. I'll say 8 because of the juice. So you can see today we've won 5. Yesterday, we won another, I think it was 6. Let's look. Yesterday we closed 7. So just between yesterday and today we closed 12, okay? The day before was another 4. So that's 16 units, okay? Now let's just say, again, we were to lose a 3-legger. That's still a +9 in the last 3 days. And that's what I try explaining to people about the benefit of cutting it off at 3. 4 you can do. But I reserve it for... Very seldomly do I do a leg 4 for that reason. Now, you can see we did good with the NBA today. We missed the Pacers. And, again, I think it's going to be good going forward. Because I keep assuming, I kind of did this with the NFL. Oh, they got to have the Pacers winning the Bulls and the Wizards all. But they can all lose, too. So, I'm wondering if it goes that way. I think the 9 and 10 seeds, it would stand the reason that these play-in teams finish with about 35 wins. So, knowing that they got to keep teams like the Magic in it, going forward, we might be fading teams like the Pacers, teams that are a couple games ahead of teams like the Magic. Because it looks like on both sides, they're keeping the about 13 teams in contention for the West and for the East. Now, I got a lot of flack when I put this out initially. This was my playoff prediction video, and you can see there's a team absent, and that's the Kings. And the reason I want to go into this is when I made this video, I did it with WWE logic. And you can see, in my opinion, a lot of it's just falling into place, okay? So what's falling into place right off the bat, what I found interesting, is the play-in teams. Now, the Hawks are probably going to win more than this, okay? I didn't give them enough wins. I have them with about 3 or 4 wins above 500. I have the Wizards right around 500, maybe about 2-3 below. And same with the Bulls. So what's interesting is this sets up MJ's 2 teams in the year 23 to play in the play-in. Wizards, Bulls. Of those teams, I actually think the Wizards would win. I think it would make it more interesting. But I think that's what they're going to go with, is Wizards, Bulls. And then you also see we have Dallas finishing with a 4 seed. And we have, at least in my bracket, the Clippers finishing with a 5 seed, which leads us to a much anticipated grudge match between the Clippers and the Mavericks now. Now the Mavericks have Kyrie. What's the argument being? If Luka had anybody, he would have had a partner to go up against Kawhi and George. So now I think they're going to force that narrative. Now, this is reminding me a good bit of San Francisco, where you have a team that people believe can win, a team that's marketable. They have a loyal fan base, and now you trade for a top, 7 player, let's say top 10 player in the game. I think by doing that, money is going to flood into Dallas. And if you guys know, I have them winning next year because of my belief that this is the 76th year. I know a lot of people fight me on that, but I'm just going by the NBA, literally calling last year the 75th. And if it was because of the 2020 year being an asterisk, then they're still conceding that last year was the legitimate 75th year. So, yeah, that is why I like the Sixers still. The 76th year, I like the Sixers. And I think they're setting it up so in the 77th year, we will get the Mavs. I think it's a little more of Luka paying his dues here. And I think everyone's just assuming if these teams play again that the Mavs will win. Now, another interesting thing is, again, I did a lot of WWE booking. And that's why I think we've been doing good with NBA now towards the latter part of the season, because certain teams have to win and lose for it to fall into place. So then we have another great backcourt versus front court matchup, whatever you want to call it. George and Kawhi versus Ant and Dame. That's what I think happens, at least. I think it's way more of a draw than, say, the Jazz or the Kings, but we'll see what happens. And then on this end, as you can see, I do have Phoenix beating Golden State. And again, this is something that's been brought up. Clay's brought it up. We'll see what happens when we meet in the playoffs. And then you got the Warriors saying, we got 4 rings, you guys suck. So I think it's interesting. Then you can see I got a Brooklyn advancing. Kyrie's 2 old teams playing makes some sense. And they'll probably make Brooklyn look all right. That's why I have them out of the first round, but then losing here. And then I think it makes sense that Philly wins a grudge match here. I believe didn't they blow a lead to Milwaukee not too long ago? I could be wrong. But either way, I think they would win this matchup. And this would set up, of course, Phoenix and the Clippers, which I think would be fresh. Again, people are going to be on Dallas. Of course, people are going to be on the Lakers. I don't think too many people are going to be on the Clippers. And I think that's why they're positioned where they're at. Kind of in the middle. At the same time, they're looking good enough that it's believable. And I think Philly. I don't think many would have Philly going. So I wanted to go into this because last I checked, the Clippers were getting, Philly was getting 11-1 to win the whole thing, I think it was. No, I'm sorry. Philly was getting 11-1 to win the East, and the Clippers were getting 8-1 to win the West, or was flipped. But they were both getting around 8-1, 11-1, respectively. And then to win the championship, those odds weren't up when I checked. But last I checked, both are still getting good odds. And the actual matchup was I think it was 22-1 or something like that. So it might have moved in our favor. It might have moved against our favor. But I put this out a while back. But it was more just running through who I think was going to make the playoffs. And I wanted to go here into why and into the matchups that I think make a lot of sense. Especially in this round, I had to really think about the play-ins. And I think it just makes sense that the Knicks making it as a playoff team. And I think they're going to flirt with Raptors and stuff. That's why if you notice, if you look at the standings here, you have so many teams finishing. And even in retrospect, you see the Pacers just right outside of it. You'll probably have teams that are going to be within a win, of a play-in spot. And the Lakers, it's going to be interesting. I actually think there's a chance they finish 11th because then they'd be right outside the .666, which would be interesting. Finishing 10th is so between 10 and 11 is the .666 number as far as percentage of the West. No, I do not think the Lakers make the playoffs or the play-in. I think that's the whole thing. They're going to pay a penance until Bronny gets in the league. Now, what's interesting is next year, by my logic at least, is year 77. And I think you know what that might mean. I think they're planting the seeds for Dallas, just not yet. I think they're going to they still are going to explain that they need a big man. They need a system. And they might even flirt with Kyrie and Luka not playing well together. But I think someone brought this up to me about Kyrie. The man got a 5-game suspension. Then he was back looking good. If there was something that he knew as far as maybe a liability claim he might have against the NBA, and whoever brought it up, it was in my Discord. I don't know. No, it was on my YouTube. So you can comment. I always try and remember and give people credit. But basically, they said if people know that this man's now if he has some kind of hold over leverage over the Nets, over the league, especially with what just happened with DeMar, and that's what I was thinking of was DeMar. But he was just thinking in general, they're not going to want that to get out. So maybe Kyrie got it easy. Now he's in Dallas, where it's not going to be as mandated for him to take a vaccine. He doesn't want to. And he's playing with a young bunch of guys where he's not going to. It's like LeBron. He's putting in the minutes, looking like, he's breaking records, but he's kind of looking like a clown too. And he's probably not going to make the playoffs. But Kyrie gets to play with the new LeBron. So I kind of look at that stuff and find it interesting, almost like Kyrie is getting something here. We can get into Ja next. Apparently he was, I don't know how accurate this is. Somebody had put it in my Discord, and I believe it. I don't think they would lie. It looked like it came from the NBA basically saying Ja attacked two Pacer staffers and like had a gun on them. And all I'll say is they book these guys like wrestlers. They keep comparing him to the new Allen Iverson, and if you didn't know, Iverson had off the court issues. I wouldn't be surprised if they're just trying to paint Ja in that light. First they're bringing the daughter to the games, and I think that was like a Seth Curry type of thing to get him over as like a good guy. And maybe they weren't selling as many jerseys as they wanted. They weren't getting that hype, if you will, for Memphis. So maybe they decided they would try something, controversial with Ja. Not saying it couldn't have happened, but I always find it interesting when these stories pop up. And again, we're getting hit with all these stories left and right, trades and now Ja, and of course the Super Bowl. And by the way, the Pro Bowl was so bad. Next year, if I am to watch, I watched it because I wanted to get information, which by the way I did. And next year I will probably say, just because the damage it took on my soul, I'll probably have to open a GoFundMe just to watch the Pro Bowl next year, just for that event, just so I can, any medical cost and pain and suffering that I might have to deal with for the next couple of weeks after the fact. I'm sure you guys understand. I wouldn't mind me taking the bullet and watching that for you guys. Was it awful? Yes. It was one of the most laughable events I've ever seen. Watching Stefon Diggs miserably fail was pretty funny. It reminded me of Sin Cara. Actually, I wanted to go into Sin Cara because it's not going to be where you're going to hear it perfectly, but this is basically why wrestling's always going to be better than... This is why wrestling's always going to be better, in my opinion, than... Here we go. Than the NFL and the All-Star Game and things like that. So you see Sin Cara making a nice little entrance here. And unlike the NFL, the WWE production crew is good enough. And again, you won't hear the sound, but it's more important you see what's happening here. The NFL is actually good enough, and I'm sorry, not the NFL. The WWE is smart enough to understand how to use camera and visual. So look at this. Wow, he just jumped into the ring without even using anything, right? Now, there was a trampoline there, but earlier we just watched Stefon Diggs hilariously fail with a trampoline. And that's the reason. I know that sounds like a petty, reach example, but that's legitimately the reason that I know it's rigged, because wrestling pulls it off so flawlessly. By the way, that guy botched his first ever entrance. He missed the trampoline and barely made it over the ropes, and it still looked way better than what Stefon was doing. So again, I know it sounds funny, but if you just watch some of the tackles, and then you watch a WWE maneuver, or you watch something like that flawlessly executed in the WWE, they try it in NFL and the guy looks like a joke, and then they're blaming the smoke for the reason. It was because they obviously didn't. They got a shitty trampoline. I mean, it's not rocket science, but they don't think these things over. The way they had the camera made it look terrible because you don't even see the trampoline. So or you do, that's all you see is the trampoline. So again, if they use the cameras in a better way, I think the NBA does a much better job of zooming away from certain things and then they'll zoom back. That's why the dunk contest looks so good sometimes, because they zoom in on the things that are important. So I know it sounds like I'm rambling, but I just wanted to go into that because it popped up in my head. And I'm like, well, instead of going into a whole nother video, I figured we would just go over a little part of that. But yeah, I thought it was interesting. Like I said, it's just another thing that, in my opinion, I don't think the NFL is even aware of. By the way, if you didn't catch it, Manning went on to say, Manning, who's coaching against his brother, as McAfee laughs and tells us, because it's the Kelsey brothers. Everyone's saying it's rigged. Then you got brother with Mannings. And then Manning literally goes on to say, we were going to run a trick play, but Stefon screwed it up and threw an interception right to Tavon. So it's kind of interesting how, again, this brother's talking about it, and then he made a reference to how if Eli had did that to me, I don't know what I would have done. So it's just interesting, in my opinion, how the brothers just are all matching up, right? Now we have, in the same game, two sets of brothers that were brought up, not to mention the brothers that will be meeting this next Sunday. So, to be honest, I don't even know who won. McAfee was so darn boring, and the game was just so bad. It was 21-21, And I don't even know how they were doing the quarters. But I saw that, and I saw the Stephon Diggs thing. I missed everything else. I saw one thing with Kirk Cousins. But yeah, it was pretty bad. So I'm curious. And oh yeah, before the game, Manning, of course, said the most important thing is we put on a good show. So now it's funny because I would think the All-Star game, the Pro Bowl game, would be the one game where they would kind of admittedly be like, yeah, we don't give it too much of a shit. But no, they were really trying to spin this like a real game. Like McAfee, I thought it was Joe Buck for a minute. So I think McAfee was kind of showing us, hey, I'm every bit as much of a stooge as you guys think I am and more. Because he was announcing it like it was this technical prowess meeting of teams, and I just thought it was funny because it was like watching backyard football. So, yeah, this is what I have for the NBA. Not much has changed. Like I said, I'm still holding down on the Kings. If they get in, it'll be as a play-in, maybe instead of like the Thunder. But I really don't. I think the Blazers are going to flip them the Wolves. I think the Wolves might have already flipped them actually. As you can see, some of my seating might not be perfect. But I was just trying to get it where I believe it's going to be. I do believe this was, as you can see, but I picked every single game for this, so I didn't have time to run through it. I had Dallas as a 4 seed back when they were a couple games below 500, and it was only because the way the Clippers were looking, they were looking to finish as like a 4 or 5 seed. So, in my opinion, the only way they could have matched up, and it made sense, because don't forget, we need the Suns and Warriors to match up, which means they both have to get out of the first round. Like, these are the kind of things that in wrestling you look at. A bad guy's got to beat a good guy so he can meet up with the other bad, go against a good guy. And you don't have two bad guys fighting each other. With basketball, it's more pre-established rivalries. Same thing with the Pels. They had brought up the Pels being a great playoff matchup and how entertaining the Pels and Suns would be. So that's why I have these teams matching up. They even showed the Pels Suns last year and showed how they were. Alvarado, Herb Jones was just too much for Chris Paul. The Suns did win in 7. I think this year they'll win in like 5 or 6 to establish that the Pels, yes, they're a good team, but they are not ready for the playoffs. They're not going to give a young team like this where Zion's the best guy a run. Blazers, again, they might get out of the first round, maybe even out of the second because of Dame, someone that's been in the league. But certain teams, are probably first round bounces. The ones that paid their dues, they'll get out of the first round. But this is more for future bets. I think the Wizards, of all the ones I have in here, probably have the best odds if you're to pick them to make the playoffs because they have to win a play-in game. And I think they beat the Bulls. For the West, I would say the Blazers making the playoffs. They're beginning of the season, they were getting 39.5 wins. Over, under, I got that. You might be able to get it live still, but it's probably updated to like 41.5. So you could do that if you want. But I like the Blazers in the playoffs, and mine doesn't have a prop for Kings not to make the playoffs. I wish it did, but I would be able to because you can take yes or no, but I wish I could pick exact like seedings like that they would fall outside of the play-in even because. Just because a team doesn't make the playoffs, they can make a play-in and lose, which just makes it where when you're betting no on these games, like will this team make the playoffs, betting no actually gives you less value than betting yes. It's hard to explain, but it's another Vegas tactic that they use. And I think it's because people have a better idea if a team won't make the playoffs than if a team will, in my opinion, because there are certain teams that we just know by how they're being set up. But yeah, don't be surprised with the Knicks. I don't think it's a fluke. The Pacers, as I said, I think they will. They're not going to get in. I think they're going to put the Bulls in instead of them. The Raptors, again, they'll get a couple wins like today to keep it close, but I don't see them finishing in there. Jazz are another one. As you can see, I have them getting flipped. I think they just started off a lot of these teams this year as spoilers, so people were kind of confused going into the year. But yeah, let me know what you think of my playoff matchups. I think a lot of them, like I said, I think they all make sense. And they're all believable too. So some are rematches, of course, like the Grizzlies-Warriors, but it's to set up, in my opinion, around the next round where it's going to be way more entertaining. And as you can see, I do have Dallas getting bounced in the first round. I have the Clippers bouncing them and then playing the Blazers. I think next year is going to be Dallas' year. And yeah, Phoenix, they're going to get the win. Golden State, again, last year was the end of their legacy. It was the end of an era. It was Steph's send-off. This year, Golden State is around for one reason, to get public money. They're just the team that everyone's going to think, because they're pitching them as the exact same they did the last year. Oh, do they have it now? Without Steph, do they have it? Can they win on the road? And then they do. So people are assuming the same thing's going to happen. And yeah, for the Sixers, I think it's the Doc redemption story. I think Doc beating his old team in the finals makes perfect sense. And that's why I have Clippers versus the Sixers. And I gave it to the Sixers in 7 games. Oops, there we go. Yeah, I think this one goes 7. Yeah, it's kind of obvious, but I also think it makes sense. Sometimes one was longer, but I haven't done a bunch of videos in the last couple of days. Been a little tired. I've just been doing a lot of stuff, mostly outside stuff, trying to help parents, trying to help my sister. They're both moving at the same time, so it's just a lot of people I'm helping. And at the same time, I got a lot of games I've been trying to watch and watching all the college spreads. But I wanted to get this out in case anyone didn't see the other NBA prediction video I did. And obviously, it's going to be updated. And I wanted you guys to see, just because they got Kyrie, I don't think it's going to. If anything, I like Dallas even less now, just because I think everyone's going to be all over them. But yeah, let me know what you think. I'm still on the Sixers winning. And for the exact matchup, I think this is one that'll fly under the radar. But it's also going to be a very entertaining one. And the NBA seems to be the closest to the WWE as far as how they book. So this is also why I'm expecting this. And one other thing, especially if the Chiefs win, which we'll get into that, but if the Chiefs are to win, it does seem like a couple people have brought up the color theory to me. The color of the jerseys, how they're all blue and gold the one year. And we've had the Georgia Bulldogs win now. So it'll be very interesting. And they beat a blue, purple, and gold team in the Horned Frogs. It'll be very interesting to see if the Chiefs win, another white and red team. That would line up pretty nice, in my opinion, for a couple NBA teams, including these two, who wear white, red, and blue. So mostly red and white. If they're at home, I think the Sixers wear the blue. But again, if looking at the logos and colors, it does seem that they're giving away a lot with that. They did it with the World Series, to the point where the map that showed, like the brackets actually was it was like a gold and blue color. So that's one theory that actually seems to have some credence. So we'll see what happens with that. But we'll go over games tomorrow. They're not till later. But yeah, congratulations. We're, like I said, notwithstanding open sequences, it looks like we're easily going to roll into the Super Bowl up over 100 units, simply since the 27th of December. And I highly recommend you watch my playlist if you have not, just because I go into every one in live time for anybody that's new, so you can see ahead of time the picks we've made and why we've made them. So take care, everybody, and happy earnings.